It's the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable from IdeaStream Public Media. Hello, I'm Mike McIntyre. Good to have you with us today. Cleveland Mayor Justin Bibb said, "In no way are we declaring mission accomplished" yesterday as he announced the city and the Department of Justice have petitioned a judge to release the city over a federal consent decree sparked by a pattern and practice of unconstitutional policing. Enough has been accomplished in the last 11 years to be released from federal control, he said. So what's next? Cuyahoga County Sheriff Harold Pertel has sued the county executive's office, saying the executive has no authority to take control of the sheriff's finances. The sheriff has had ballooning overtime expenses in recent years, and the executive, who appoints the sheriff, is seeking to rein in the budget. Lorain County says a 12% raise over 3 years is its best and final offer to the unionized Department of Job and Family Service workers who went on strike Wednesday. The employees, members of the United Auto Workers, say they want back pay too. School crossing guards will gain more power and protection under a bill introduced in the Ohio House this week. Too many drivers don't pay them heed. And Ohio is putting its foot down on the invasive lanternfly, the spotted lanternfly, which happens to be a good way for you to help eradicate them too. Just put your foot down and go squish. Joining me to talk about all of this week's top news, IdeaStream Public Media's criminal justice reporter Matt Richman, who's been covering the consent decree for years. Good to have you with us, Matt.
Good morning, Mike.
Good morning. And also with us is our senior arts reporter, Kabir Bhatia. Good to have you with us, Kabir.
Thanks for having me.
In Columbus, a woman who wouldn't hurt a fly, but will rain hellfire on a spotted lanternfly. Karen Kassler, good to have you with us.
Actually, not true, because I saw one in Cleveland last year, and I couldn't squish it.
Oh, come on.
I know I'm supposed to, but yes, you're supposed to, but so I'm going to, if I see one, I'm going to do it.
Okay, you'll get off, muster the courage.
Exactly.
But I get it. I was right. She wouldn't hurt a fly, even a spotted lanternfly.
Too.
What's that?
They're really messy.
They're
They
very
make
messy.
They are messy, but even more messy, and we'll find a little bit more out about that to Ohio's economy if we don't get a handle on the invasive species. By the way, you can join in by sending us an email with a comment or a question. SOI@ideastream.org is the address. And right now, let's get ready to roundtable. The City of Cleveland and the Department of Justice agree that the city has done enough to be released from a consent decree imposed due to unconstitutional policing involving excessive use of force and civil rights violations. That was entered into in 2015. They've asked a federal judge to sign off. There's a hearing this morning that Matt will be at as soon as this show is over. The mayor says work still needs to be done, but the city should be in charge of it, not the feds. So, Matt, we've been hearing from the city really since Mayor Bibb came into office that it's time to wind this thing down. The federal monitor has said, maybe not. But now we get to the point where the DOJ is agreeing with them and saying, hey, Judge, let's end this thing.
Yeah, so, they're back in April of last year, the Trump administration or President Trump issued an executive order saying the Department of Justice needs to move toward rescinding or ending all the existing consent decrees. So, when that came out, it was clear that it was a matter of time. During budget hearings this week, Law Director Mark Griffin told council that, as soon as last May, he started direct outreach to the Department of Justice to say, hey, what about us? we think that we're ready to go. And he's been arguing that because the consent decree and the investigation that kind of led to it was based on use of force and was based on the way the police respond to people in mental health crisis, that those were like the two main pillars of what the investigation found the police department was, had the biggest problems with, that the department really just needed to get to the point where they had those two areas kind of under control and fixed to really have addressed the problems that the Department of Justice found. And the monitor who oversees the consent decree in the last year, did kind of full assessments of the progress that the city's made on those two areas particularly, and found that they've really done a good job. And so in the motion in court from the Department of Justice in the city and in the city's kind of arguments in court for years, they've said that because we've done so well in those two areas, it really is time for us to move on.
So this is not just a situation where the Trump administration, with its blanket announcement that consent decrees really need to come to an end. So this isn't just that, where the feds are coming in and saying we're just kind of lifting these on people. They're agreeing that the city has done enough, especially in those two main areas. But there are a whole lot of other areas where it was supposed to make progress and maybe has, but it has not checked off every single box.
No, absolutely not. I mean, that's one of the interesting parts is because in the consent decree, it kind of said, well, so you have these problems, but you're never really going to fix them unless you fix the way officers are overseen. If you fix the way that, you have to fix the way accountability is, officer accountability is handled. That, you can put in policies and training, but there has to be that oversight and the kind of structural changes to make sure that years down the road, you're not backsliding into kind of the old ways. And as far as, the monitor coming in and checking those areas, making sure that when officers are promoted, they're looking at kind of some of these new elements that have been added by the consent decree and the way officers have kind of taken those up, or, is discipline kind of administered fairly and consistently and doesn't change based on kind of politics or depending upon who the individual officer is and how they're viewed by, their supervisors. They haven't really gotten into those questions yet. And so it'll be interesting to see if Judge Oliver says he wants to see more.
So the judge still has to sign off on this. This is not just, okay, the two parties agree it should end. The judge could say, nope, I think there's a few more things you got to do, and we're going to let this go on, or we'll find out today. He might say, yeah, you know what, you're right, that's enough. What the mayor is saying is not, we're finished. What he's saying is, a lot more work to do, but we can handle it now.
Yeah, and he also seemed to indicate that the monitor wasn't necessarily going away immediately. That there's a police accountability team within the city that was created to kind of be the point person inside city government to handle all consent decree matters. There's no indication that the person who runs that, Dr. Lee Anderson, and her staff are going anywhere. So, and it'll be interesting to hear what they say in court today. There's kind of a bit of a door open to continued work, but what that'll look like is really going to be a big question today.
And we saw Dr. Anderson at the press conference yesterday, along with the mayor. Also, we saw Blaine Griffin, the president of Cleveland City Council. Is his voice the voice of council? Do they agree that the consent decree should be lifted?
Yeah, yes. For years, what you've heard from council is that they are kind of tired of this outside oversight, that it's costing the city a lot of money, and exactly how much money really would be saved by ending the consent decree is a matter of some debate.
Something like $5 million a year.
Well, it depends upon, that's a whole, but it depends on what you put in, exactly what will go away when the consent decree is over. We know that the bills that go to the federal monitor, those would end, but that comes out to, and this is also a matter of debate, maybe $2 million at the most. But even that, I think, is inflated if you just look at the bills that they submit to court. But I think that there's been a lot of concern that that somebody like City Council, that there are enough internal oversight mechanisms set up by the city, and they don't need this outsider coming in and telling them how to run things.
But it seems as though they did need that outsider, because this came in 2015. We've seen a lot of reform, according to the city and the monitor, in the last 11 years. Would any of that happened had it not been forced?
That's a very good question. I think there were so many changes to the way the police department did its work. From how it recruited officers to how it trained them to the equipment that they are able to use. Just kind of everything. And yeah, the idea that the city would have undertaken that years-long process that was so all-encompassing on its own and stuck with it for years is it's hard to believe that would have happened.
There are members of the community, including those who lobbied for the passage of Issue 24, that is the thing that created a community police commission, who aren't happy with this development. They're going to be meeting with the mayor. But what do they say? Why do they think a consent decree needs to still be in place?
Yeah, I mean, there are continued concerns that, maybe there are on paper a lot of improvements, and there are a lot of statistics that show some changed practices in the police department. But, as a issue for community members, they don't see really this transformed police department, whether that's just kind of lingering feelings about how it was before, or how much it is. Like really, if you look closely, it's the same old Cleveland Division of Police. There is not that perception that this is a new police department. And so they're concerned that it's not really time yet, that, also leaving the consent decree seems to have been done in kind of, as far as what the public saw, in sort of the snap of a finger, if the judge approves this. And they said that there should have been some more public engagement about this. There should have been some more explanation of why the city believes it's time to do this. That just never really occurred in the way they would have liked to see it.
There's going to be some of that on the Sound of Ideas Tuesday. The city is booked. I think the police chief is going to be on, and they're going to discuss this. Will the Community Police Commission still exist?
Yeah, that's now part of the charter. That was originally created in the consent decree, but it was passed in issue 24 and is in the charter. That's a whole nother. I mean, that was created to sort of be the independent oversight that continues to exist after the consent decree is over. But you saw it in budget hearings this week. There's already a lot of rumbling about going back to the voters and rethinking whether the CPC should continue to exist.
Okay. Well, we'll keep an eye on that. You'll be at the hearing today, so check out ideastream.org for our online coverage. Listen to the station, as Matt will have some reports starting in the afternoon. And welcome to the Matt Richmond Show, because our next item is also Matt Richmond. Usually it's the Karen Kassler Show to top the show, but Karen's taking a breather right now, so is Kabir Bhatia, and we've got a little bit more for Matt Richmond to clue us in on. Cuyahoga County Sheriff Harold Pretel filed a lawsuit this week claiming County Executive Chris Renane's office has no right to take over financial control of his department. It's the latest salvo in a long-standing conflict over spending in the Sheriff's Department, where overtime has ballooned. And so let's talk about that. What prompted the legal action? First of all, what prompted the executive to say, I got to step in? And then secondly, the sheriff to say, I'm filing suit about it.
So this came to a head during budget hearings in December. And, the county executive will present a budget that involves recommendations or requests coming from every department. And particularly this year, the executive very often will say, no, you're not getting that much money. And then comes up with the budget that goes to council, and then each of those department heads who work for the county executive go into county council and say, yeah, we can live with this. The budget office from the sheriff's department did not do that. Went to council and said that they're underestimating what we need for overtime, and this is not going to work for us. And and they argued a bit over the math, and there were some kind of public back and forth at the hearing. And shortly after that, or kind of in the middle of it, the executive brought the budgeting office that is under the sheriff, that is normally just handles the sheriff's budget and is overseen by the sheriff, kind of physically moved that staff into county headquarters and said, you work under us now. This is kind of part of our budget. And that didn't go over well with the sheriff's office. And, this was an issue at this budget hearing. But if you go back, the last 4 years, and I think further than that, but every year the sheriff comes to county council, or multiple times a year, and says they need more money. And this is, on the quarter, 10, 12, $15 million a year.
Yeah, in 2022, $16 million. In 2023, $19 million. In 2024, $16 million. 2025, it looked like it might be around $15 million again. It's not a couple of bucks.
Yeah. And so, the executive saying we have to get this under control.
So isn't the sheriff, though, and this is exclusive to Cuyahoga County, but isn't the sheriff appointed by the executive?
Yeah, that's part of why this lawsuit was filed, is because it's not so clear as if it was an elected sheriff, which is how it is in every other county in Ohio. There's independence with that office, and it was a real issue with the problems in the jail in 2019, 2018, because it turned out that the county executive at the time, Armin Budish, had sort of gone in, put his person in charge of the jail, and sort of usurped the power from the sheriff over running the jail. And that became a big problem. The person that the county executive put in that position was eventually charged for crimes for the way the jail was run. And so, county council kind of said, you need to let the sheriff handle their own affairs, and that includes the jail. That's primarily the jail.
And Chris Renane and the executive office are saying, yeah, sure, but not the finance, not the administrative.
Right, and it's not clearly spelled out where the kind of line ends. And so, the county prosecutor Mike O'Malley and the county sheriff's office obviously have said, no, if we're independent, that means we're independent over how we spend our money. And the county executive said no.
But O'Malley's elected,
Yes.
not an appointed.
Well, yeah, he was speaking on behalf of the sheriff.
Right. Another point, we didn't hear anything specifically about the suit because it's a pending lawsuit from the executive's officer from the county. But we did hear them say this is a waste of taxpayer money that the sheriff is embarking on. What kind of money are we talking about?
I think Cleveland.com got a number of around 100,000. If it kind of gets up to trial, I mean, if it goes to trial, I guess who knows what'll happen then. Yeah, about 100,000 to basically sue one part of county government sue the other part of county
Yeah, I
government.
don't think I'd ever thought I'd see this, and it just seems like literally the airing of dirty laundry.
Yeah, and it's basically to kind of interpret law as opposed to there's not some great kind of mistreatment being done here to someone. They're just trying to interpret the law.
And to the grammar police, I know it wasn't literally airing of dirty laundry, or they would have dirty laundry hanging on a whatever. All right, moving on. Figuratively, that. Employees of Lorain County's Department of Job and Family Services went on strike Wednesday morning after contract talks failed to reach a new deal. The previous contract for employees who are represented by United Auto Workers Local 2192 expired in September. So how far apart, Kabir, are the two sides? It sounded like the offer was 12% over 3 years. You might look at that and say, okay, that's something. The employees, though, are saying that's not enough. Why?
Well, the contract, it expired in September. They want back pay to that, and they would like just, I guess, generally better wages, not just the 12% over 3 years. The thought from the union representatives is that a lot of the folks who are running Job and Family Services are paid little enough that they qualify for the services that are offered by JFS, food pantries, Medicare help, that sort of thing.
Wow. So they're saying, listen, we don't make enough. 12% of too low a salary is still too low a salary.
And over 3 years, and it's been, 5 months? The previous one expired. They would like the back pay retroactive to that as well.
Meanwhile, the county leaders are not backing down. What do they have to say?
Well, as of Tuesday night, they said, this is our best offer, and the county commissioners put out a video saying that the demands are a little bit unreasonable from the other side. So the county, the people that are negotiating this with the union, they're saying that we're all set. This is where we're at. And so Wednesday morning, the workers went on the picket line. As of this morning, they were still there.
So what is happening to the vital services that Job and Family Services provide?
Well,
who does it?
I'm not sure what else he would say, but Chris Cabot, who runs things over there, said we're going to keep the services going. So I guess he's going to find a way to keep the services going somehow. It reminds me of about 20 years ago on SNL, they would have George W. Bush, and his catchphrase was, "We're working hard." Do you remember that? So,
No.
Well, it reminds me of that.
Right.
Because what else are you going to say? You can't say that we're just closing the doors. So that's his opinion. The union reps, which Dave Green, he's the regional rep, who, by the way, is also handling Conn-Selmer, the closure of the Conn-Selmer instrument plant. He was previously with GM Lordstown, a union rep. So he's familiar with this area, very passionate. And he was saying, look, we've had 90 people leave in the last few years for better paying jobs from this department. So something needs to be done.
Okay. All right, we are going to take one more incredibly important story before the break, and I think this probably should have been the lead, and that is what a game yesterday. I was in a Teams meeting, but I was watching Team USA women's hockey during that meeting. Sorry, coworkers, my attention was elsewhere. When we came from behind to tie Canada with time running out and then secured a 2-1 victory in 3-on-3 overtime, and our own Cleveland Heights Olympian Layla Edwards played a big role. Her shot that was spot on, redirected in the final minutes of regulation by Hillary Knight for the game-tying goal, was a crucial assist by Edwards. And we had our folks out there, Karen, at the ice rink in Cleveland Heights, which is really cool. They were actually sitting on the ice watching. There it is. They're watching the game as it was being played out. What were your reactions, Karen? I know you're a hockey fan.
Well, this is great. I mean, women's hockey has just the United States has just dominated in women's hockey. I mean, since 1988, when they started playing women's hockey in the Olympics, the U.S. has appeared in 7 of the 8 gold medal games. We've won 3 golds. Canada still beats us, but hey, we're getting there. And then Layla Edwards, the first black woman to win gold for USA in women's hockey. It's just amazing. And here's an interesting connection. She played for Wisconsin. That team is coached by Mark Johnson, who scored 2 goals in that Miracle on Ice game
Yeah.
back in Lake Placid in 1980, where the U.S. beat the Soviet Union. So it's just really kind of a coming around story, so to speak.
Where Ken Morrow of Bowling Green State University was on the team. That's right. Kabir, that it really is groundbreaking, though. It's breaking barriers for women of color in hockey.
It is. She is, as Karen said, the first black woman to be able to do this. She got an assist, to use the parlance, from the Kelsey brothers, helping to fund some. I think she has over a dozen family and friends who were able to attend, and a lot of them because of their help and their shout-outs, because they're all Cleveland Heights folks, and they stay close-knit. I mean, Layla left this area when she was 13 to attend school in New York and then Wisconsin, but they stayed in touch.
Yeah, Cleveland Heights definitely rallies around the Kelseys, now Layla Edwards as well. And yeah, there was a GoFundMe, and people were contributing. And then there was this $10,000 contribution from an anonymous person.
Quote unquote.
And it turns out, as she's acknowledged, it was the Kelseys that were certainly helping to send the family there. What a cool story.
It was very cool. I was also on a Teams, but I was watching out of the corner of my eye. And I actually saw our friend Mike Polk at a watch party on a competing channel. And then I was able to find the rest of the game, and my daughter and my wife were watching too.
Mike Polk is on Channel 3. We can say that.
What now?
Okay, fair. All right, time now for a quick break. And when we come back, the warm snap is breaking up river ice, and that can create flows that clog and flood. Authorities have their eyes on a number of local waterways. This is the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable, and I'm Mike McIntyre, and we will be right back. You are back with the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Mike McIntyre, along with Kabir Bhatia and Matt Richmond of IdeaStream. And in Columbus, State House News Bureau Chief Karen Kassler. And we encourage you to try our IdeaStream News Quiz. It publishes every Friday. You'll see it in your inbox, or you can just go online and check it out. It tests your knowledge on the week's news. You'll find it on our website, ideastream.org/quiz. Did you guys take it yet today?
No, it's on my list.
You'll be ready for it when the show is over.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. All right, Ohio retail billionaire Les Wexner answered questions from the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform Wednesday from his home in New Albany. The committee is investigating Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking network. Wexner had a close relationship with Epstein for years and was identified in FBI paperwork as a co-conspirator, though he has not been accused of wrongdoing, not been charged with anything, and describes Epstein as a world-class con man. He denied any knowledge of Epstein's criminal dealings. And Karen, before the questioning, Wexner said he was gullible in relation to Epstein. What did he mean by that?
Yeah, he put out a pretty lengthy statement kind of recapping what he intended to tell the committee. And I should note that the committee did come here as opposed to deposing him in Washington, and it was 5 Democrats, and none of the Republicans on the committee did make the trip, and neither did Democrat Shontel Brown from Cleveland. But that's just a little side note here. He put out this statement basically saying he was naive, foolish, gullible. He had been conned by Jeffrey Epstein, and the members of the committee said that they just kind of were having trouble believing that, or at least believing that he wasn't as close to Epstein as he is, as they wanted to find out that they believe he was, because they were saying the amount of money that was involved in this that Wexner allegedly gave Epstein is just too much for them to not be close and not have a close relationship. And so it's been interesting to watch, too, that the video of that deposition has been released, and to see some of the answers and the way that everybody related to each other in that deposition.
Yeah, and about that deposition, his testimony detailed how Epstein was hired as a financial advisor and then swindled him, and that their relationship ended just before the allegations against Epstein came out.
Yeah, he says he cut off contact with Epstein in 2007. Obviously, there are some questions about whether that's the case. He had granted Epstein power of attorney to manage his personal finances at one point, which to the members of the committee suggested that they were close. And there's just a lot of documentation here that members of the committee say that they're concerned about that shows that Epstein and Wexner were actually a lot friendlier than Wexner is now saying. And, Wexner is basically saying he got conned and he really wasn't that close to him. And so it's again, it's a deposition. It's not, Wexner's not been charged with anything. There's no assumption of guilt here, but it's just been interesting to watch.
There was a great story that published today on NBC News from Henry Gomez, the former Plain Dealer reporter, political reporter, who's still local but covers all kinds of politics and anything that relates to Ohio. And he lays out sort of Wexner's rise, and it starts really with a donation to George Voinovich and a relationship that got him into the political circles, but in recent years has waned a bit because he became kind of a never-Trumper just before this. And so there was just real interesting history about him. But one of the things it points out is how his name is on everything, and especially at Ohio State University, where they're about to open a big expansion of the Wexner Medical Center. And there have been some who have said his name ought to come off of those things. The governor yesterday said, I haven't seen that he did anything wrong. And there are others that are defending the name staying on those buildings and others.
Yeah, you have some lawmakers, people who are running for different offices who have given back Wexner campaign donations, trying to separate themselves from Wexner. You are right that back in 2017, Wexner had said publicly that he really didn't want to be a part of the Republican Party anymore because he was disappointed with what was happening with President Trump. But he still continued to donate to Republican candidates all up and down from local, state, federal. He did donate to some Democrats, for instance, Columbus Mayor Andrew Ginther. But it's the reaction among those who have received Wexner campaign cash has been largely to say they're going to give it back. Now, Republican Senator Bernie Moreno has said he's not going to give it back, and Andrew Ginther, the mayor of Columbus, has also said that. But you've got some lawmakers now who are questioning whether Wexner's name should be all over everything at Ohio State, including the state senator who represents Ohio State, Democrat Bill DeMora, who's an alumnus. He's a huge fan, and he says Ohio State needs to walk away from this. It's still being tainted by the Dr. Richard Strauss scandal, and so this just makes things more difficult for Ohio State. It has the money. It should just walk away from all these things.
Okay. Let's get to the lanternfly, which we're told you should not walk away from. Ohio has expanded its quarantine for the spotted lanternfly to all counties in the state. The invasive species was first spotted in Ohio in 2020, and we're generally a peaceable people here, but if you see one of those suckers, you're supposed to smash it. Karen, what does the quarantine itself mean for Ohio?
Well, last year it was in 18 counties. This year it's considered spread throughout the state. And so what it means is that inspections will have to happen on trees and nursery stock that are leaving the state. The real concern here is the damage it can do to apples, hops, black walnut trees, and especially grapes and grapevines. Ohio's wine industry, according to the Department of Agriculture, is estimated to bring in $6 billion to the state's economy. So if you start messing with that, there's a real concern that the spotted lanternfly could have an effect on that.
Got some thoughts on that. One from Steven, who sends in an email. He says, don't feel bad, Karen. My understanding from at least one entomologist is that they are so numerous now that our squishing efforts will have basically no impact. And although the income crop damage is very real, the overall plant damage is not devastating like we originally thought it would be. Something will have to be done for crops, but eradication is likely no longer possible. That's Steven's point of view.
And the Department of Agriculture Director Brian Baldridge actually said that the eradication plan just doesn't exist. And so now it's just trying to, as he says, protect our neighbors and to try to keep the thing from spreading into other states, though it spread here from Pennsylvania. So you can also spray white vinegar on it, I'm told, as opposed to squishing it. These are the two ways to get rid of it, but you're supposed to get rid of them when you see them. And it's just really hard to do for me.
And I hear you. And hard to do, I think, for Lucy as well, who's a frequent contributor here. And she sends us an email saying if people were serious about reducing or eliminating lanternflies, they'd simply paint certain trees with a non-toxic immunocontraception, a fertility disruptor, so they can't reproduce. Personally, I don't kill for ethical reasons. Cleveland Metro Parks takes in $90 million annually and could lead this novel birth control movement. That's Lucy's point
That's
of
very
view.
interesting.
That's actually a good point.
Yeah.
I was at Topiary Park in Columbus, right by you, Karen. Every tree was covered. This is last fall. Every tree was covered, so we would have been there all day squishing these things, and
Wow.
yeah, it wouldn't have made a difference.
All right, Karen, you get a bit of a break. Maybe we can fix. I hear some clipping on your sound there, so maybe we can get that fixed while we're talking about another local story, and that is public safety and core city services are at the top of Mayor Justin Bibb's budget priority list. Spending for police and fire EMS as well accounts for roughly half the city's operating budget. Matt, what will the city focus on specifically in terms of safety spending?
So they, in the last couple of years, they've taken some steps to boost officer salary. They've kind of gotten the dwindling numbers of the safety force under control. And so it's salaries. They're spending about $14 million, or they're budgeted to spend $14 million more. And that's pretty much go to salaries. They are trying to get from, I'm not sure what the most recent number is. It hovers right around 1,200 uniformed officers right now, give or take.
Yeah.
And they're trying to get up to 1,350. And
That'll be a cost as well. More
but
salaries.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Ideally, they'll get 180 officers through the academy in a year, which they have so far been unable to do the last few years. And then, if they do that and have basically nobody leave the department, retire or just quit over the course of the year, then they could make it, but that doesn't happen. So, they're probably down around 1,200, and they'll have some money left over as they do each year.
And a couple other things the mayor said during these budget discussions. The city stands by the consolidation plan that will shrink the footprint of the city school district, even though council offered some opposition. What was that exchange like?
This is pretty heated. Each council member really wants to protect the schools in their ward for obvious reasons, and some of them sort of have a historic place in the ward and really hate to see them leave. The mayor just kind of said that he is trying to deal with the reality that they're shrinking enrollment numbers. He said it's 50% since in the last 20 years, the enrollment numbers have declined.
Right.
And he's saying that, a previous mayor should have dealt with this. This is just kicked down the road, and I'm here to kind of accept reality and do what needs to be done.
It does seem like he wants to do these, sort of the big things like end the consent decree, actually shrink the footprint of the school district because he says it needs to be done. Get rid of Burke Lakefront Airport. I mean, there are these major projects that he might explain in each one of those situations should have been dealt with, but hasn't been.
Yeah, the slogan from his sort of long shot campaign was Cleveland can't wait. That was what he was saying, is that we have to start doing the hard things. And he ran against sort of an establishment that said, "Oh, this is too difficult, too complicated. We've looked at it. It's just not going to happen." And he's saying, I'm going to make it happen.
We talked last week about how the city lost more than $3 million in grant money. The state clawed it back because it was way too slow in replacing doors and windows in lead homes that had high levels of lead, and this would be one of the things that would help with that. Some of the explanation then was, well, the federal requirements were too heavy, and we'd had to remediate all the lead, and it was a slow process. The mayor, though, basically fessed up and said, nope, that was us, and we didn't do a very good job.
Yeah. I mean, initially members of his administration went to city council and blamed the state. It came out that some of the restrictions that they were referring to at city council were not part of the state requirements in the grant. But then the mayor went to council and said, yeah, this was our fault. And they put a cap on the amount of money that could go towards remediation in each house that was not something created by the state. And they made limits on what parts of the house could actually be worked on that were not necessary. And then, this is something, you want to do a big thing. The way that getting money out of the door at a city hall works, and all the time it takes, all the red tape that you have to get through, and then for grants, there are rules about like how it's supposed to be reimbursement. All of this stuff makes it so hard to get any kind of like city hall funded work done. And that's one of the things that I think, in this term, you're going to see a growing pressure on the administration to change.
And we usually get some good fireworks when it comes down to the final budget where council's input is given. They are the ones that has to pass it. So I'm sure we'll hear some more from each of these budget items.
Yeah, and then they went to council and didn't talk about how the consent decree was ending, and that was the day before they announced that it was ending. So it'll be interesting if council says, "Why don't you come back and talk about this?"
Yeah, it'll be another one we can look forward to. State money for the Browns complex in Brook Park is still in limbo pending a legal challenge to the state's plan to create a fund for cultural and sports facilities. Still, as expected, other pro sports teams are lining up for their share. The Guardians and Cavs have put in for more than $100 million for upgrades to Rocket Arena and Progressive Field. Matt, that was quick.
Yeah, yeah. It seems like this was a novel remedy to the very quickly dwindling funds for these repairs, and so everybody made sure they got in line right away.
Yeah, $500 million for the Browns, and originally that was the only deal. But then when they crafted it, it became a much bigger pool. You would think that teams would get in line for it, and they have. And when you talked about what it'd be used for, there's right now Gateway is on the hook for doing repairs because the public has to pay for the maintenance of stuff there. We're supposed to be funding that with a sin tax. You would have to really increase that sin tax in order to cover that. What they're saying here is this might be one other measure that can kind of help.
Yeah. For now, it seems sort of like they're rifling through the couch cushions looking for leftover change. Doesn't seem like this is a permanent or a long-term solution because I don't think that this fund gets replenished quickly enough to keep up.
And they haven't
demands.
And they haven't spent anything out of it because there's still a legal challenge as to whether you can use that money for those purposes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That still exists. Whether this is legal, because it's supposed to be, members of the public's money who they're unclaimed funds.
And Karen, where does that stand? The legal challenge?
Right now, it's still in court, in state and federal court. The transfer, I believe, was stopped by a state court, but a federal court said it could go. So it's still in legal limbo, I guess, in terms of whether it will be approved. The question's been all the time whether it's constitutional for the state to take unclaimed funds and move it to an account that would then provide grants for sports facilities.
Okay, and thank you to Chris Dudley. You sound pristine now, Karen. Good
Awesome.
to have you. Another thing in terms of legal challenges that was dropped was the city's legal challenge, and it was a long one, to the Browns moving to Brook Park, finally acquiesced to that. And we learned this week the city of Cleveland spent more than $1 million taxpayer dollars for outside legal help in the bid to keep the Browns from leaving downtown. There's still more legal challenge going on, though, Matt, from Dennis Kucinich. That's still in play.
Yeah, and I think the city and the Browns have kind of dismissed that as not a concern, but that is still out there and it's costing somebody some money.
Yeah, it'll increase the tab, and in terms of that tab, that $1 million for outside legal counsel, it's not unusual. Generally, you're going to have outside legal counsel on those things.
Yeah, they hire it for when they're doing they hire a labor attorney for their union negotiations. They've hired an outside attorney, a former public safety director for the consent decree work. So, a lot of, or most of the big cases will get some kind of subject matter expert brought on.
Okay. And then there, of course, is that money for the sheriff's suit against his own county.
Yeah, and that's a conflict of interest problem.
Okay, fair enough. Right. All right, the big warm-up in temperatures this week has helped to remove almost the entire snowpack from that big storm in January. One giant mound melted near my house. They found another dollar store under there. I couldn't believe it.
Oh, no.
No, truly, though. Seriously, the thaw brings worry for local rivers. Ice chunks begin to move, and the flows can turn into jams. The Grand and Chagrin rivers are big concerns right now. Kabir, for people living along the rivers, fairly regular occurrence. Sometimes we just sort of see this beautiful sense of nature, this sculpture that's floating by, but it can get pretty nasty too. I remember back when Pickle Bill's was taken out.
Oh, that's right, Pickle Bill. Well, you live west, right?
Yeah, but I just remember the story. I have a passport.
Okay,
I can get to the east side.
What's your address? No,
specifically.
It's very cool to look at. You're right. It's when these chunks of ice kind of congeal together, and then they block the water. And then suddenly, where's the water going to go? It's not going over the ice. It's going off to the sides, and it's going to flood all of our yards and whatnot. And it happens every spring. If you're in Northeast Ohio, this is a common occurrence. And for our listeners in Guam, this is what happens when there's all this ice that's going to be flowing.
Yeah, a slow
down the
melt
river.
would be nice, but what happens with us is we have massive ice, and then boom, we get 68 degrees like we did the other day.
One day, and then next week it'll be back to a blizzard.
And tonight it's supposed to be cold again. So keep your eyes
true.
on that, folks. We know there are people that are watching it, and be safe along those rivers. Two Ohio lawmakers want to punish people who don't heed crossing guards. House Bill 690 would also level penalties for harassing, threatening, or intimidating crossing guards. Back when I was a kid, the crossing guard was a fellow student. We harassed them all the time. But now we're talking about adults, people who are volunteers, retirees, etc. What type of penalties are proposed in this bill, Karen?
Well, this would basically increase fines, and especially in school zones, drivers could face a first-degree misdemeanor for failure to obey. And the whole idea behind this is because there was a national investigation by the Associated Press and Cox Media Group stations, including a TV station out in Dayton. The investigation documented more than 230 times that there was a crossing guard that was involved in some sort of incident in the last decade, and nearly 36 of those were fatal. So this is a serious problem that the state basically has said is not being taken seriously enough.
All right, we need to take a real quick break here. We're going to come back for the home stretch, the final 10 minutes of the program. Please stay with us. It's a Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable. I'm Mike McIntyre. We'll see you in a minute. And welcome back to the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable. I'm with Matt Richmond and Kabir Bhatia, who was just on cello on that last bit.
You know it.
I'm Mike McIntyre, and Karen Kassler is with us as well. She was on piccolo. Matt, what were you playing there? I couldn't distinguish.
The cowbell.
The cowbell. More cowbell. We definitely needed more cowbell. All right, good to have you back with us as well, whatever instrument you might be playing. And we discussed last week the bill from Republican State Representative Jamie Callender that would withhold state funding for school districts involved in a lawsuit challenging Ohio's private school voucher program. More than half of the state's 600 districts have filed suit. It's in the Court of Appeals. Outrage over Callender's bill seems to have prompted a bit of a neutering of it. What do we know, Karen?
Well, I've been trying to reach Representative Jamie Callender, the Republican sponsor of the bill, and he has not really been talking to anybody about it except our colleague Morgan Trow from News 5, where he told her that he's going to change the bill so that it isn't, if a school district is suing the state over its state foundation funding, then the amount of money the school is spending on that lawsuit will be withheld and pulled back from the school district, as opposed to all of the school district's funding, because the original bill had said that any school district that's suing the state over its funding, all of that money will be held back. So school groups are still saying this could be, they feel it's unconstitutional, because they say the Ohio Constitution is very clear that the state needs to fund its public schools, and so they're calling it the bully bill, because they say that this is an attempt at intimidation to get them to stop suing the state over vouchers, which that lawsuit is continuing.
And so what would the revised bill possibly do? We've heard it would do, instead of taking away all their funding, it would do what?
It would take away just the funding that the school district is spending on a lawsuit.
Got it.
So, yeah, because the argument has been, why should the state be giving money to school districts that they then use to sue the state? So, and school districts have said, hey, we have the right to sue, and the state is required by the Constitution to fund public schools.
Okay. The American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network of Ohio, ASCAN, wants all payments, including coupons for copay assistance, to count toward a patient's deductible, and is pushing for passage of Senate Bill 207 to make that happen. Karen, it deals with something called insurance accumulators. What is that?
Well, insurance accumulators, and a lot of states have banned these. It basically involves your deductible, and that you might not be paying on your deductible when you think you are. And, you know, insurance agencies, insurers can refuse to count payments like those that are made from manufacturers on a patient's behalf toward out-of-pocket prescription costs. So it's really trying to help people who are seeking other, like more experimental treatments for cancer, to get those and still not have it basically drive them into medical debt.
Yeah, what's interesting about that is you get some sort of relief. You know, they offer you, okay, we'll give you $5,000 toward the cost of this treatment, and then your insurance company doesn't accept that as part of your cap or your deductible,
Yeah.
and so you end up with zero benefit from somebody giving you that coupon or other kind of thing.
Yeah, and the bill will basically require health insurance agencies to recognize any payments, which include, say, coupons or copay assistance, as going to the deductible.
Okay.
So, and the whole idea is, again, to just help cancer patients with these, specifically cancer patients, but also anybody with these huge medical debts from diseases that they're fighting for potentially years.
All right. If you ever use the rest stops along I-71 near Brunswick and Medina County, you might have to drive a little bit longer because they're going to be demolished to make way for a huge expansion in truck parking. It's part of a push to keep the roads safe by assuring commercial drivers have more places to rest. Demolition begins March 2nd. Why are more spaces needed for truck drivers rather than this more expansive rest stop?
Well, the governor has said he wants to increase greatly the number of truck spots throughout the state. So there's about, by my count, 6 rest stops between here and Columbus on 71, another 4 from Columbus to Cincinnati. And truckers need that because they can only drive 11 hours within a 14-hour period. Then they have to be off for 10 hours. It's very strict. These are federal rules. So they're going to need those spots to pull into and take a little nap.
So, yeah, and this gives them more spaces as we're looking at this. One of them would go from the northbound area from 10 spots to 29. The one in the southbound from 20
to 66.
to 66 parking spaces. So just more places for them to rest. And in terms of the number of stops for you to, as a motorist, to go, there's going to be another one 30 miles down the road.
Right. They'll still have those. And when it comes time to refurbish, it's, I guess, I'm sure, easier and cheaper to refurbish 3 for the general public than 6.
Now, if you really had to stop, though, are you prohibited as somebody is in a car to stop at those places?
You're not going to get cited, and they don't have as many amenities as the quote-unquote regular truck stops, but you could do it if you had to. There's a restroom, there's some water.
I mean, if you got to go, you got to go.
That's true. I hear that.
2 international men's soccer clubs will face off at Huntington Field this summer. Brazil versus Egypt will be the first meeting of those teams since 2011, part of FIFA's Road to 2026 series, referencing this year's World Cup in L.A. Matt, I know you're going to be at the World Cup in L.A. You're from California. You just go back, I'm sure. But this is the first time not the first time Brown Stadium has hosted high-level soccer.
Yeah, they had a game between the Columbus Crew and Inter Miami. And that, of course, includes Lionel Messi. And so there was a record crowd, like over 60,000 people at that game.
This will be a great game, and Brazil is an amazing team, but Egypt is led. They have been, but Egypt is led by the great Mo Salah, who plays for my team, Liverpool, up the Reds, and would love to go and see that. So if anybody's got like sweet tickets or something, it feels like they want to invite me, I'd be happy to go.
There you go.
I'd love to go to this, too. A year-long celebration for Lorain native Toni Morrison. It began this week. She once worked for Lorain Public Library. She was celebrated for her novels, children's books, plays. We all know all about her. She won the Pulitzer Prize in '88 for Beloved. Yes. And she passed away in 2019. How much does her legacy still resonate in Lorain?
I mean, people still talk about her, obviously, all throughout the state. Her books are in libraries. People are still reading them. To kick off this year-long celebration, the Greater Books of Cleveland Book Club had a virtual meeting, and they read The Bluest Eye, her first novel. So still very paramount, even now on her, what would have been, I think, 95th birthday.
And what do they have planned in Lorain, or what have they started?
Not just in Lorain, it's statewide.
Oh,
There's
statewide,
events. There's libraries are having events. I mean, go online, check out our story. It's statewide as far as there's showings of Beloved and other documentary about her that came out a few years ago. There's, as you said, book clubs, so lots of stuff.
Yep, City Club of Cleveland has an event today. You can check that out. You can check it out on our air. And also stream it on cityclub.org. If you want to watch it in real time, it'll be on television on Sunday. Book club discussions at Cleveland Public Library, East Cleveland Public Library, Lit Youngstown, Willoughby, East Lake Public Library, all that stuff.
Everywhere.
Kabir has it in his story, and great story. Appreciate you doing
very
that.
much.
The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is expected to release the nominees for the class of 2026 by the end of the month. And as the new class takes shape, some old criticisms about the hall get new traction. Axios Cleveland reported on a column that ran in the Wall Street Journal in early February, where Christian Schneider argued inclusion of rap and disco acts should lead to changing the hall to the American Museum, the Museum for American Music. Kabir, come on.
Well, I mean, that kind of, to me, I picture folk music when I hear that, or America's music really is technically jazz. So that title, I don't know that would work, but the proponents of the hall, they're saying, look, this is a hall not just for rock, it's for disco, rap, everything. People who changed culture. That's how it goes. It's not just record sales.
All right. Guys, great job. Really good hanging with you, Kabir, and Matt. Thanks for being here with your expertise on that, on the consent decree particularly. And Karen, good to talk with you as well.